Lil Wayne was a druggie. Like this group of guys are druggies.
While DMX's story ended in tragedy, another Southern legend's addiction carved a different but equally devastating path. Lil Wayne. Born Dwayne Michael Carter Jr. in New Orleans, Wayne signed to Cash Money Records at just 12 years old and grew into one of the most influential rappers of all time. But alongside his success ran a long, dangerous relationship with lean, a mixture of prescription cough syrup containing codeine and promethazine, usually mixed with soda and candy. Wayne was exposed to drugs early, growing up in Hollygrove, a neighborhood where substances like codeine were part of everyday life. Lean wasn't just something he used, it became part of his identity. He celebrated it openly in his lyrics, turning it into a lifestyle symbol. Songs like Me and My Drink helped glamorize lean across hip-hop culture, influencing an entire generation. The consequences were severe. Wayne began suffering frequent seizures, landing him in hospitals repeatedly. In October 2012, he had 2 seizures aboard a private jet, forcing emergency landings. In March 2013, he collapsed during a video shoot and was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where doctors pumped his stomach and found dangerously high codeine levels. He spent 6 days in the ICU after reportedly consuming 3 bottles of lean the night before. By 2023, Wayne admitted he suffers memory loss related to epilepsy, sometimes struggling to remember his own lyrics, damage many attribute to years of substance abuse. Mental health battles worsened everything. In 2021, he revealed he attempted suicide at just 12 years old. Though he's tried to reduce his lean intake under medical advice, concern remains about the long-term damage.
Do you want to stop?
Yeah.
Are you working on it?
Yeah, every day. Every day.
And how so?
I start my day off with a prayer, ask the Lord to guide my steps and, cover me, keep me safe.
For another legendary figure, the demons proved far harder to escape. Earl Simmons, the world knew him as DMX, was a raw, unfiltered force of nature. His gravelly voice, ferocious delivery, and deeply personal lyrics made him one of the best-selling hip-hop artists of all time. But beneath the platinum plaques and sold-out arenas lived a darkness planted early in his childhood, one that never truly loosened its grip. DMX was introduced to drugs at just 14 years old in an act of betrayal that haunted him for the rest of his life. A local rapper named Reddy Ron, someone DMX trusted as a mentor, tricked him into smoking a blunt laced with crack cocaine. At that time, young Earl didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't touch drugs. Reddy Ron, nearly twice his age, never told him what was in it. DMX later called that moment the birth of the monster. From that single betrayal grew a lifelong addiction to crack cocaine. His environment only made things worse. Growing up in poverty-stricken projects surrounded by crime, DMX saw robbery and music as his only paths forward. When his career exploded in 1998 with its Dark and Hell is Hot, the fame didn't cure his addiction, it amplified it. By the early 2000s, arrests piled up, drug possession, assault charges, DUIs, all directly tied to substance abuse. In 2016, DMX nearly died in a Yonkers hotel parking lot after overdosing. He collapsed and had to be revived with Narcan. Rehab attempts followed. Public interventions. Appearances on Dr. Phil and Iyanla, Fix My Life. He openly discussed childhood trauma and emotional pain, but the addiction remained intertwined with untreated mental health struggles. On April 2, 2021, DMX suffered a heart attack triggered by a drug overdose that deprived his brain of oxygen. He fell into a coma and passed away on April 9, 2021, at just 50 years old. Toxicology reports revealed a lethal mix of cocaine, fentanyl, and other substances. His death marked one of hip-hop's most heartbreaking losses, a reminder that talent alone doesn't protect anyone from addiction.
Lil Wayne was a druggie. Like this group of guys are druggies. It wasn't just syrup, he was doing all that shit. He was doing shrooms before they were talking shrooms. That's why all this music, homie, his creativity. He can't tap back in because he's done burnt out. He needed these drugs and this mind-altering substance to go into this studio.
Lil Wayne nearly drank himself into organ failure. Mac Miller slowly turned success into a quiet form of self-destruction. Gucci Mane sank so deep into addiction that incarceration ended up saving his life. These aren't exaggerated stories or internet myths. These are real rappers who stood on the edge of death because of drugs and, in some cases, never made it back. And when the conversation turns to MCs who walked straight through the fire and somehow came out alive on the other side, no story is more intense, more frightening, or more unbelievable than that of Marshall Bruce Mathers III. The world knows him simply as Eminem. The Detroit lyricist who rose from poverty to become one of the most successful and respected rappers in music history spent years trapped inside a pharmaceutical nightmare of his own making. A nightmare so severe it nearly erased everything he worked for, including his life. Eminem's downward spiral didn't happen overnight. It began during the early 2000s, when the weight of superstardom became unbearable. Non-stop touring schedules, relentless media pressure, anxiety that never let up, and crippling insomnia all collided at once. After the Slim Shady LP and the Marshall Mathers LP turned him into a global phenomenon, the demands multiplied faster than his ability to cope. Prescription pills became his escape. At first, they seemed harmless. Doctors prescribed them, pharmacies dispensed them legally, and Eminem believed that made them safe. That assumption blinded him to how fast things were slipping out of control. In 2002, while filming 8 Mile, he was prescribed Ambien to combat severe insomnia caused by brutal shooting schedules and exhaustion. The drug felt like a miracle. It erased his thoughts, numbed his anxiety, and allowed him to function emotionally detached. But tolerance builds quickly. What started as one pill escalated into opioids and benzodiazepines, Vicodin, Valium, and eventually methadone. By 2004 and 2005, Eminem was consuming between 20 and 30 pills a day, sometimes far more. At his worst, he admitted to taking as many as 60 Valium pills and 30 Vicodin daily just to feel normal. Everything came to a terrifying halt in December 2007. He bought pills from a dealer, believing they were Vicodin. Instead, they were methadone, far stronger and deadlier. He collapsed in his bathroom and was rushed to the hospital, where doctors told him he had been just 2 hours away from death. Even that didn't end it. He relapsed within a month. But eventually, through one-on-one counseling, intense physical training, and support from sober friends like Elton John, who became his sponsor, Eminem found his way back. He's been sober since April 20th, 2008. As of 2026, that's over 17 years clean. His survival stands as one of hip-hop's most powerful redemption stories, but it's only one chapter in the genre's long and painful war with addiction.
It's like a fine line between having an influence and like letting the drugs like do you instead of you doing the drugs, like, cause it's so easy to get overconsumed and shit. I mean, I kind of lucked out because I didn't know the fine line between like, you know, just taking something to come up with some ideas or getting the vibe versus that being the lifestyle.
Hip-hop has always celebrated survival, but behind the anthems, accolades, and platinum plaques lies a darker reality, one shaped by addiction, trauma, and unchecked access to substances. Over the decades, the culture has produced not only legends, but cautionary tales that reveal how success can magnify personal demons rather than silence them. From Detroit to Atlanta, from Chicago to Pittsburgh, some of the most influential artists in music history have fought wars against addiction, some surviving, others losing their lives. Eminem's story is often cited as one of recovery's rare victories. At the height of his fame in the early 2000s, relentless touring, anxiety, and insomnia pushed him toward prescription drugs. What began as doctor-prescribed medication escalated into a dependence on opioids and benzodiazepines so severe that by 2007, he was consuming dozens of pills daily. A near-fatal methadone overdose forced a reckoning. Through rehabilitation, physical training, and support from sober peers, Eminem reclaimed his life and has remained sober since 2008. Not everyone escaped. DMX's battle with addiction began in childhood after being unknowingly exposed to crack cocaine by a trusted mentor. That betrayal ignited a lifelong struggle that intensified alongside his fame. Multiple arrests, overdoses, and rehab attempts followed. In 2021, DMX died at 50 after suffering a heart attack triggered by a drug overdose, marking one of hip-hop's most painful losses. Lean culture became another destructive force. Artists like Lil Wayne and Pimp C openly embraced it, helping normalize its use. Wayne's addiction led to repeated seizures and lasting neurological damage, while Pimp C's dependency, combined with sleep apnea, resulted in his death in 2007. Their influence unintentionally glamorized a substance that would later claim younger lives. That generational impact became tragically clear with Juice WRLD and Fredo Santana. Juice WRLD's openness about opioid dependency did not save him from an overdose at 21, while Fredo Santana's untreated trauma and prolonged Xanax and lean abuse led to organ failure and death at 27. Others, like Mac Miller, battled addiction publicly through their art. Despite periods of sobriety, Mac relapsed and died in 2018 from fentanyl-laced pills, igniting urgent conversations about contamination and accountability. In contrast, artists such as Gucci Mane, T.I., Macklemore, and Flavor Flav survived by confronting addiction head-on, proving recovery is possible, but never guaranteed. Together, these stories expose a truth hip-hop can no longer ignore. Addiction does not discriminate by talent, wealth, or legacy. It thrives in silence, accelerates under pressure, and leaves consequences that echo far beyond the music.
I had a drug problem, for a long time. It wasn't just in music, but I definitely was going through a drug problem, and I think it was more my state of mind. I was just pretty depressed, as everyone.
Even while successful?
Yeah, I think it started.
With success?
Yeah.
Another young artist whose dependency on lean shocked the world was Juice WRLD. Born Jared Anthony Higgins, Juice emerged from Chicago's SoundCloud scene with emotionally raw music blending rap, emo, and pop-punk influences. His breakout hit Lucid Dreams turned him into a global star, but his lyrics consistently foreshadowed his internal battles. Juice began experimenting with drugs around 14 or 15 years old, influenced by the music he loved. He openly credited Future's lean-heavy sound for introducing him to it. His addiction revolved around prescription opioids, Xanax, and codeine-laced lean. As his fame skyrocketed, access made things worse. Those close to him noticed he hid pill use depending on who he was around. During a 2019 tour in Australia, his engineer Max Lord confronted him in tears, terrified he wouldn't survive. Juice agreed to rehab, scheduling treatment for December 22, 2019. He never made it. On December 8, 2019, just days after turning 21, Juice suffered a fatal overdose after landing at Chicago Midway Airport. Witnesses saw him swallowing Percocet pills as police searched his plane. Narcan was administered, but it was too late. His mother later founded the Live Free 999 Foundation to support youth struggling with addiction, anxiety, and depression. Mac Miller's battle with addiction was equally tragic. Born Malcolm James McCormick, the Pittsburgh native evolved from lighthearted mixtapes into deeply introspective jazz-infused hip-hop. His addiction mirrored that transformation. Starting with weed in high school, Mac's substance use escalated as fame intensified. Bad reviews and touring pressure pushed him toward lean and harder drugs. In a 2013 interview, he admitted heavy lean use, openly stating he wasn't happy and stayed intoxicated constantly. His 2014 mixtape Faces chronicled daily drug abuse and suicidal ideation. Though he achieved periods of sobriety, his 2018 breakup with Ariana Grande triggered relapse. On September 7, 2018, Mac was found dead from a combination of fentanyl, cocaine, and alcohol. His death fueled urgent conversations about fentanyl's deadly reach. Gucci Mane's story stands as one of hip-hop's most dramatic transformations. Raised in East Atlanta, he was exposed to drugs early and became deeply addicted to everything from lean and crack to prescription pills. His addiction fueled more than 20 arrests. In 2013, he entered rehab before federal prison, where he got clean cold turkey. He emerged transformed, physically and mentally, becoming a vocal advocate for sobriety and mental health. T.I., Macklemore, Flavor Flav, and Fredo Santana all reflect different outcomes of addiction: recovery, relapse, survival, and loss. Together, their stories paint a brutal but necessary portrait of hip-hop's ongoing struggle with substance abuse.
I was addicted. If addiction, I was addicted, but I didn't think I was addicted during my usage. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't think that I was on the drugs so bad that if I stopped, I would have physical withdrawals. I associate that with drug use and drinking stuff. Man, when I went in jail and then I went drinking lean, I went through withdrawal, you withdrawing from heroin or something like that. It was
Mac Miller's story stands as one of the most painful examples of how talent, sensitivity, and success can collide with addiction in devastating ways. Born Malcolm James McCormick in Pittsburgh, Mac entered hip-hop as a bright, carefree teenager making upbeat, playful music that reflected youth and optimism. His early mixtapes earned him a loyal fan base, and by the time Blue Slide Park dropped in 2011, he had become the first independent artist in decades to debut at #1 on the Billboard charts. But behind the smile, the jokes, and the laid-back image, Mac was quietly unraveling. Mac was never secretive about his struggles. His substance use began with marijuana in high school, something he often described as normal for his environment. As his career exploded, the pressure intensified. Harsh critical reviews of Blue Slide Park, the relentless touring schedule, and the expectations that came with sudden fame weighed heavily on him. To cope, Mac turned to heavier substances, first increasing his weed consumption, then moving toward lean, alcohol, and pills. In a 2013 interview with Complex, he admitted plainly, "I love lean. It's great. I was not happy, and I was on lean very heavy. I was soaked up all the time." That honesty shocked fans, but also revealed how deeply trapped he had become. His 2014 mixtape Faces became a raw diary of addiction, depression, and existential fear. The lyrics were dark, confessional, and disturbingly prophetic. Lines referencing overdoses, coffins, and self-destruction weren't metaphors, they were reflections of his reality. At the same time, Mac was evolving artistically, incorporating jazz, live instrumentation, and deeply introspective songwriting. The more brilliant his music became, the darker his personal life grew. By 2016, Mac managed to achieve a period of sobriety, publicly stating he had been clean for several months and felt mentally clearer and creatively reborn. That optimism, however, proved fragile. In 2018, after his highly publicized breakup with Ariana Grande, Mac relapsed hard. Alcohol returned, followed by cocaine and pills. On September 7, 2018, he was found unresponsive in his Los Angeles home. Toxicology reports later confirmed acute combined drug intoxication, fentanyl, cocaine, and alcohol. The fentanyl came from counterfeit oxycodone pills supplied by dealers who were later charged. Mac Miller died at just 26 years old. His death sent shockwaves through the music world, igniting renewed conversations about fentanyl contamination, mental health, and the pressures artists face behind the scenes. For many fans, Mac wasn't just a rapper, he was a mirror of their own struggles. While Mac's story ended tragically, another Southern legend's addiction followed a different path, equally destructive, yet culturally transformative. Chad Lamont Butler, known to the world as Pimp C, was one half of UGK, the duo that helped define Southern hip-hop. Pimp C was unapologetically authentic, outspoken, and deeply influential. He also became one of the most visible figures associated with lean culture. Lean, a mix of prescription codeine cough syrup and promethazine, became synonymous with Southern rap, popularized by DJ Screw and artists like Pimp C. Pimp didn't just rap about lean, he embraced it as part of his lifestyle. Tracks like Sippin' on Some Syrup openly glorified the drug, helping cement its place in hip-hop culture. But behind the bravado was a dangerous reality. Pimp C's addiction was severe and long-term. Compounding the danger, he suffered from sleep apnea, a condition that already compromised his breathing. After serving nearly 4 years in prison, Pimp C returned to heavy lean use. His health declined rapidly. On December 4, 2007, he was found dead in a hotel room in West Hollywood at just 33 years old. The coroner ruled his death accidental, citing respiratory depression caused by codeine and promethazine combined with sleep apnea. His passing became a wake-up call for the Southern rap scene, exposing the lethal consequences of a culture that had normalized substance abuse. What often goes unexamined in conversations about hip-hop and addiction is the environment that silently enables these patterns to flourish. The music industry rewards productivity, not stability. Artists are praised for output, touring endurance, and constant visibility, while emotional well-being is treated as a secondary concern, if it is considered at all. For many rappers, substances initially function as tools rather than escapes. Pills help manage exhaustion. Lean dulls anxiety. Alcohol smooths the pressure of constant scrutiny. Over time, these coping mechanisms become dependencies, quietly embedded into daily routines. The pressure intensifies once an artist becomes profitable. Record labels, management teams, and touring partners depend on consistency. Canceling shows or stepping away for rehabilitation is often framed as a financial risk rather than a health necessity. This creates an unspoken incentive to keep going at all costs. When addiction begins to show visible consequences, the response is frequently reactive instead of preventative. Intervention happens only after arrests, hospitalizations, or public breakdowns force the issue. Social media has further complicated this cycle. Artists are no longer just musicians, they are brands expected to perform authenticity in real time. Vulnerability is monetized, and pain becomes content. When Juice WRLD rapped openly about drug use and mental health, fans praised his honesty, but the system surrounding him failed to translate awareness into protection. Transparency did not equal safety. In some cases, it even intensified the pressure to live the image being consumed by millions. There is also the myth of creative necessity, the idea that suffering fuels greatness. This narrative has long haunted hip-hop, reinforcing the belief that sobriety dulls authenticity. Artists who attempt to step away from substances often face skepticism, both from fans and peers, as if clarity threatens credibility. Yet history repeatedly disproves this notion. Artists who survived addiction frequently report sharper focus, longevity, and deeper creative control after recovery. Another overlooked factor is the lack of long-term support structures. Rehabilitation is often treated as a one-time solution rather than an ongoing process. Once an artist completes a program, they are frequently returned to the same environment that caused the problem, with minimal aftercare and unrealistic expectations. Relapse, in these conditions, becomes less a failure of willpower and more a predictable outcome. Understanding addiction in hip-hop requires moving beyond individual blame. These struggles are not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a system that prioritizes output over preservation. Until the industry acknowledges its role in sustaining these cycles, the same tragedies will continue to repeat generation after generation. In recent years, the consequences of ignoring these realities have become impossible to dismiss. The growing list of artists lost to overdoses has forced hip-hop into a moment of uneasy reflection. What was once dismissed as personal weakness is now increasingly recognized as a structural failure. The question is no longer whether addiction exists within the culture, but why it has been allowed to thrive unchecked for so long. One critical shift has been the emergence of conversations around mental health, particularly among younger artists. Unlike previous generations, many now speak openly about depression, anxiety, and trauma. However, openness alone does not resolve systemic neglect. Awareness without infrastructure creates the illusion of progress while leaving the underlying risks intact. The industry applauds honesty, but rarely invests in sustainable solutions. Another alarming development is the rise of synthetic drugs and contaminated substances. Several recent deaths were not the result of intentional misuse, but of fentanyl-laced pills sold as prescription medication. This has transformed casual or habitual use into a lethal gamble. Even experienced users can no longer accurately assess risk, making every relapse potentially fatal. Despite this, meaningful reform remains slow. Drug testing, mental health professionals on tour, and enforced rest periods are still exceptions rather than standards. Financial incentives continue to outweigh human considerations. For many executives, artists remain assets, valuable, replaceable, and ultimately expendable. Yet change is possible. Some artists have begun setting boundaries, restructuring tours, and demanding mental health support as part of their contracts. These decisions are often met with resistance, but they represent a necessary shift in priorities. Survival, not sacrifice, must become the new measure of success. Hip-hop has always been a reflection of reality, not an escape from it. The culture's power lies in its ability to tell uncomfortable truths. Now it faces one of its most difficult truths yet: talent alone cannot protect its creators. Until the industry learns to value preservation as much as performance, the cost of silence will continue to be paid and lives cut short. What makes this moment so volatile is not the idea that a star player might challenge the system, but how quickly the illusion of stability collapsed the instant that possibility became real. For years, the WNBA carefully cultivated a narrative of steady progress, measured growth, expanding visibility, and a league finally finding its footing after decades of uncertainty. Caitlin Clark's arrival appeared to accelerate that story beyond anyone's expectations. She was not simply a talented rookie or a popular scorer, she became a cultural catalyst. Attendance surged. Television ratings climbed. Media coverage exploded. For the first time, the league felt less like a long-term project and more like a finished product. And that is precisely where the danger began. Behind the scenes, however, that confidence masked a fragile reality. While public messaging emphasized collective success, the economic engine driving the league's sudden momentum was far more concentrated than many were willing to admit. Revenue growth, sponsorship interest, and mainstream relevance were not evenly distributed forces. They were tied disproportionately to one figure, one storyline, and one unprecedented wave of attention. The league wanted to believe it had reached a point where no individual player could destabilize the whole structure. Yet the moment Clark's name became even loosely associated with labor tension, that belief unraveled almost instantly. The players' union did not act irrationally. From a strategic standpoint, their decision to opt out of the existing agreement early made sense. The league was growing. Money was flowing in. Public interest was peaking. Historically, those moments represent leverage. Waiting until momentum cools is rarely advantageous in collective bargaining. The assumption was that the league, eager to preserve its upward trajectory, would meet demands rather than risk disruption. What the union underestimated was not management's resistance, but the league's dependency. For years, the WNBA operated on a principle of shared struggle. Players, executives, and fans alike embraced the idea that growth was communal, earned slowly, and protected collectively. Caitlin Clark's emergence disrupted that balance. Her popularity did not grow organically over decades. It arrived fully formed, fueled by college stardom, media saturation, and a fan base that followed her, not the league. That distinction matters. When attention follows an individual rather than an institution, power dynamics shift whether anyone acknowledges it or not. This is where miscalculation occurred on multiple sides. The league assumed its recent success had diversified its appeal enough to absorb any shock. The union assumed that leverage was distributed evenly across the player base. And Clark herself, intentionally or not, became the focal point of a conflict she did not create but could not escape. The moment public debate shifted from league growth to what happens if she walks, the entire framework changed. Growth was no longer viewed as inevitable. It became conditional. Media figures were quick to point this out, but the discomfort did not come from their commentary, it came from the truth behind it. The idea that a league built on collective identity could suddenly feel vulnerable because of one player was deeply unsettling. It contradicted years of messaging, advocacy, and internal reassurance. Yet the numbers told a different story. Viewership spikes aligned with her appearances. Ticket prices responded to her schedule. Broadcast partners paid attention when her games aired. This was not coincidence. It was concentration. What followed was not panic in the traditional sense, but institutional anxiety. Messaging became cautious. Public statements grew vague. The language shifted from confidence to reassurance. No one wanted to admit what was happening because doing so would mean confronting a reality that undermined the league's moral foundation. Women's basketball was supposed to be beyond this. It was supposed to represent something purer than star-driven economics. But ideals do not pay operating costs, and they do not protect against market behavior. The most revealing aspect of this moment is not whether Clark leaves, stays, or remains silent. It is how quickly the league's sense of control dissolved once her autonomy entered the conversation. That alone exposes how incomplete the growth truly was. A healthy system does not destabilize at the suggestion of individual leverage. A mature league does not find itself hostage to a single narrative. Yet here, the reaction spoke louder than any contract negotiation ever could. This is not a failure of ambition, nor is it an indictment of the players demanding fair compensation. It is a warning about premature celebration. The WNBA's recent success is real, but it is also young. Profitability is recent. Visibility is fragile. And cultural relevance, once gained, can disappear just as quickly as it arrived. Treating this moment as a finish line rather than a checkpoint created unrealistic expectations on all sides. If there is a lesson here, it is that sustainability cannot be built on momentum alone. It requires structural resilience, diversified appeal, and an honest assessment of where power truly lies. Until the league, the union, and its most visible stars align on that reality, moments like this will continue to feel less like negotiations and more like existential threats. Growth is not proven when everything is rising. It is tested when something threatens to walk away.